So my name is Channing, that's Luke in the stations for us down there, and this is our helper Reese today, and we are going to be introducing you guys to some of our sensational snakes.
Who's ready to meet some snakes? Awesome! I am so glad to hear that because the first one we're going to meet is one of the most sensational in our collection. This is one of the largest types of snakes we can see alive today, and they're out waiting in ambush for their next unsuspecting prey item to wander on by, so they can reach out, grab it with some razor-sharp teeth, wrap them up, and squeeze them to death. You may have guessed it, we're getting ready to meet a python!
And here he is!
What?
This is Mac, and he is a ball python coming from Africa, and he is probably not as cool as you guys were expecting. But let me tell you, he is still an amazing predator. This snake is actually capable of moving at a blinding speed of up to 1 mile per hour. He has some razor-sharp teeth. They can help him take on the largest of small mice. In fact, a single bite from him can not only mildly inconvenience you, but even hurt your feelings.
Yeah, I was expecting some giant man-eating python out on stage, not some little puny ball python.
Yeah, I know we typically associate that word python with those gigantic snakes who, like you said, could even eat a person. However, most pythons are really small, like the ball python here, only reaching like 3 to 5 feet long.
Interesting. Well, despite that small size, he is still a predator, right? Like, he would still want to hunt down and chase something made out of meat, like a person, right?
Well, I mean, we can test it if you like.
Okay, let's do it.
So what I think we need to do is get a volunteer to help us out. Who wants to help us out? How about you right there? How about you come up to the front? You come right over here on these stairs.
Right side.
Alright, why don't you come stand right here? What's your name? Drake? Y'all get Drake a big round of applause for him. Do you have any idea what you just volunteered for? No? You're gonna find out if snakes like to eat people. Isn't that exciting? Yeah? Alright. So now you're gonna stand right here for me, buddy. Come stand right here. Alright, I'm gonna let Max smell you, and then I'm gonna place him on the ground. You're gonna run over there to Luke and see if he chases you down, okay?
Oh, wait, is this safe?
That's one way to find out, right? Alright, I'm gonna smell you. Smell you real good. Alrighty. Face that way. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go!
Come on.
Go!
Go.
Okay, give me a high five. Everybody give him a big hand. Yeah! Sit back down. Wow. So it seems to me like he's not really doing anything there, much less chasing anybody.
Do something.
So I guess some of the things we've heard about snakes has been really over-sensationalized by movies and media and things like that nowadays. But you know what? I think the truth about them is far more fascinating. In order to discover that truth, we need to go back to the beginning. And I mean the very beginning, all the way back to the book of Genesis, where God tells us he created the world in 6 literal 24-hour days, around 6,000 years ago. Now on days 5 and 6, he created the animals. And on day 5, you get the ones that fly through the air and swim through the water. And on day 6, he created the beasts of the earth and creatures that creep along the ground. Now, he just sat there and very, very, very slowly, if anything, moved along the stage. So this is going to qualify as one of those day 6 animals, right?
Absolutely. In fact, most snakes are day 6 animals. And when we talk about snakes, we do know they're a group of larger animals called reptiles. We know snakes are one of those animals in that group, but there are actually 4 more, because there's 5 different groups of animals and reptiles. Do any of you guys know what some of those other 4 are? No? Mammals are not a type of reptile, that's a good guess. Lizard, that's one of our groups. Frogs. Not frogs, those are amphibians. Sapiens are turtles and tortoises, that's one of our groups. Anybody know another one? We have crocodilians, that's our alligators, crocodiles, caimans, gargoyles, things like that. And we also have my personal favorite, which is the tuatara. The tuatara is a very unique group of reptiles. This is not really a group at all. It's only one reptile, and it is the only one in that group, just the tuatara. It's the only one left over there. And while it may look like a lizard, it is actually completely unrelated to any other reptile alive today. So it's a really interesting animal. On top of that, it can live well over 100 years. So they're a very unique creature there. But we don't just want to talk about why this animal is so unique. We want to find out what makes snakes so unique. So in order to do that, I think we need to meet one of those other groups of animals I mentioned before.
And here one comes. This is Steve. Steve is a type of lizard called a bearded dragon. We can find these guys natively down in the dry and arid regions of Australia. You're going to notice notice some things here on his body that make him a lizard and not a snake. But if you had to guess what was the #1 difference between these animals, what do you guys think it is?
See, legs is the most common answer we get. We hear a lot of people say if an animal has legs, it's most definitely not a snake. And while it is true that you will never see legs on a snake, it is not always true that you will see legs on a lizard. And that's because of this guy right here. That's a sheltopusik, also known as a European legless lizard. There's actually well over 20 different species of lizards alive today that have no legs at all, some of which even live here in the United States. So if we can't rely on legs to help us tell the difference, then what exactly can we rely on?
You're going to have to look at the faces of these two animals to figure it out. If you guys look on the side of Steve's head here, you may notice some little holes there. These are his outer ear structures he's using to speak, just like, or these are his outer ear structures he's using to, you hear me speak, just like y'all can right now. However, if you look on the side of the snake's face, you're never going to notice any holes there. That's because they don't have any ears at all. They instead have internal ear structures that help them feel vibrations in the ground, meaning they can't hear very well. So if you were to go for a stroll outside, walk up, find a snake, jump back and scream, "Ah, there's a snake there!" All that snake sees you doing is, and you just look very silly to them.
Now, to be fair, I think you look pretty silly all the time, especially right then. On top of that, it's not just their ears, they also can tell by their eyes. If you're paying really close attention to Steve, you may have actually seen him blink while he was up here on stage. But you know, you will never win a staring contest with a snake because they physically cannot shut their eyes. Instead, they have a clear scale drawn over their eyes called an eye cap or spectacle that acts as a permanent pair of contact lenses. What that allows them to do is they can swim underwater and see perfectly clear if they were wearing a pair of goggles. They can also dig underground, keeps debris and dirt from getting into their eyes. And it would be really unfortunate if they only ever got one set of those lenses, because if they got scratched up, they wouldn't be able to see anymore, and that would just be it. But luckily enough for the snake, every single time they shed their skin, they get a brand new set of those lenses.
Ooh, has anyone ever found a snake skin outside before? Quite a few of us have. If you haven't, here's what one looks like. Now, if you go to the top here where the snake's face would have been, if it wasn't in the wind, you're going to notice a couple little circles here. These are the eye caps or spectacles that Channing was just talking about that act like the snake's pair of natural glasses there. Now, it's very important for them to shed the skin, as he was mentioning, to keep these lenses clean all the time. Not just for those eye caps, but for every scale covering the snake's body. Each time snakes shed their skin, it gives them this really cool, shiny, glossy, almost slimy appearance to them.
Now, we of course know snakes are not slimy, but I don't want you guys just to take our word for it, so we actually need somebody from the audience to help us prove it. So who wants to help us out again? I'll have you up there, buddy. Or we'll have you come stand right here in the front. What I will do, I'm going to reach down with Mac, I'm going to let you pet him down his back with 2 fingers, and then I want you to tell me if he is slimy or dry. What's he feel like?
Dry.
He feels dry. Also, I'll give him a round of applause for helping us out. Now, if you guys would like to pet a snake at the end of the program, we will invite you guys up to this yellow line, let you pet some more snakes, and we'll take photos and ask questions, so you won't be the only one today. But it is really important to think about why it would not work for these snakes to be slimy. It actually is impossible for them to be slimy because they have no pores in their skin at all. We as human beings, we actually do have pores, and that allows us to produce things like oils to help keep our skin hydrated. We also can produce sweat through our skin and stuff like that. So if somebody ever tells you don't like snakes because they think they're slimy, they should probably do some self-reflecting, because we as human beings are actually a lot more slimy than snakes are.
And when you think about it, it really wouldn't make much sense for a snake to be slimy like Channing was mentioning. They live in a lot of different places and they need to be able to move throughout them. Ball pythons like this slither effortlessly along the surface of the ground. Some snakes dig under the ground. Some snakes swim underwater. Some in Southeast Asia even kind of glide through the air, which is crazy to think about. But our next snake is fantastic at climbing around through the treetops.
All right, let's meet him. Here we go. This is Mr. Cyrus. And Cyrus is a jungle carpet python coming from Australia. And he is an amazing climbing snake, like Luke mentioned. One way we know that is because he can support his entire body weight by the tip of his tail, and he can actually pull himself all the way back up onto my arm as if it were a tree branch. That is the equivalent of us as human beings dangling from monkey bars by our toes and pulling ourselves all into a standing position, which is exhausting just thinking about, but these animals make it look very easy. And there's a really important reason for snakes like Cyrus to need to be able to climb as well as he does, and that's simply the food he likes to eat. See, Cyrus loves to eat birds, and to test y'all's knowledge here. You find more birds on the ground, you find more birds in the trees. Obviously, you can find a lot more birds in the trees. So it wouldn't really do him much good if he was a snake that loved to eat birds and lived on the ground, because he'd have a hard time finding his favorite food. But no matter where these snakes live, they need to be able to rely on their senses to help them locate their prey. And these two snakes are some amazing examples of animals locating their prey.
They certainly do. You guys may have noticed snakes licking long forked tongues in and out at you guys. What are they doing? Smelling, that's right. Of course, we smell with our noses. Snakes do have noses, but they're very small and they use them mostly for breathing instead of for smelling. They will instead flick out those tongues, catch scent particles out of the air, bring them inside, and rub them on the roof of their mouth on something we call the Jacobson's organ. The Jacobson's organ is like a teeny tiny little computer that decodes those scent particles and tells the snake what's going on in the environment around it.
They have another sense as well that these two snakes have, but not every single snake does. And that's actually little holes on the front of their face. You may be able to see with Cyrus, since his are pretty pronounced. But those holes are actually his heat sensing pits. And those allow him to detect a temperature change up to 0.05 degrees, which is even more sensitive than the tips of our fingers. Now, not only can he detect that temperature change, but these snakes also have something called an optical nerve running from those heat pits all the way up to their brain, and that allows them to see thermal vision like a thermal camera. So if we were to make it completely dark in here, these two snakes could still see every single one of you guys where you're sitting. Isn't that cool? Yeah. Definitely not frightening at all, right? There are some snakes here in the United States that do have that. We don't really have to worry about them. They're just the venomous ones. But yeah, these guys, they do have those heat pits to help them find their prey, which is one of their amazing abilities to help them locate the food they like to eat.
Now, one thing that pythons have in common, no matter where they come from in the world, is that they're going to wrap around and give their prey a nice warm hug in order to kill it. They so there's a special word for that being called constrictors. Of course, pythons aren't the only constrictors in the world. You get some other really cool ones called boas, but some of my favorites would be a special group of snakes called colubrids, which are going to contain things like king snakes, rat snakes, corn snakes you guys might be familiar with, and one of my personal favorites, the Taiwan beauty snake. This is Miss Delilah. And as I mentioned, she is a Taiwan beauty snake, meaning guess where she comes from? Taiwan, of course. Now, she is a very beautiful snake. You can see where she gets that name from. And a lot of people would look at a snake like this and think it makes a really cool pet. Unfortunately, some snakes get really, really big. Do you guys think this is a big snake? Yeah. I heard a lot of yeses. I'm going to have to disagree with you guys. I think this is kind of a small snake, especially when we compare her with some of the largest snakes in the world. Does anyone know what the biggest one is? It starts with an A? Anaconda, that's right, which the world record was actually 33 feet in length. By comparison, Miss Delilah here is only about 7 feet in length. And if we look back into the fossil record, we can see evidence of an even larger snake called the Titanoboa. Scientists estimate that this one could once reach up to 45 feet in length. Now those are some big snakes, and they must have some equally massive appetites to support those bodies, right?
You would think so, but before we move on to that, I do kind of want to put that size into perspective for you guys. Because saying 33 feet and 45 feet really doesn't mean a whole lot when we just say those numbers out loud. So I actually would like somebody to help me out with showing you guys exactly how big these snakes get. I need somebody who's a little bit taller to help me out with this one. I can get you to help me out. What I will do is I'm going to hand you the other end of this tape measure. I want you to run all the way to that pole over there. And we are going to show you guys both 33 feet and 45 feet. So go all the way over there. We're still going here. All right, stop right there. We're not even at 30 feet yet. Here we go. 33 feet right here. This is the world record for a snake that was found alive last year. Pretty big snake. That's 33 feet long. And then if we keep going all the way back, we could get to 45 feet. This is the largest snake to have ever existed in the Titanoboa, which really puts in perspective how massive these animals can truly get. Thank you very much for helping me place it down. I'll reel it back in here. But while I'm reeling this in, Luke did bring up a pretty good point. Let's talk about the appetite of these animals. Instead of being such large animals, you would expect them to have amazingly large appetites. But the thing is, those giant snakes really didn't eat very much food at all. On average, they only eat 1 meal per month, and in some cases can go up to a year in between meals. And the reason for that is that they are cold-blooded or ectothermic, meaning they don't regulate their own body temperature unlike us as people. When we get really hot, we sweat. That's our body's way of cooling ourselves down. When we get really cold, we shiver. That's our body's way of warming ourselves back up. And it takes tons of energy in order to do that. Snakes don't have to do that. They get hot, they go sit in the shade. When they get cold, they go sit in the sunlight and warm themselves back up. On top of that, they can sit in the exact same place without moving for up to a week at a time without drinking any water or anything like that. So they really are not fitness experts. They don't burn many calories at all. So all these things together allow them to go great amounts of time in between their meals. Well, these being such large and impressive animals and not eating very much food at all, you guys think they make very good pets? No. Not at all. Those giant snakes are better left to large zoos and facilities who have multiple people who can take care of them, and the main reason is just the cost. Those animals that are really large need equally large habitat. And in fact, the rule of thumb with the snake is the habitat has to be exactly as long as the snake is at a minimum. So I have a question for you guys. If you have a 30-foot long snake, how long does the habitat need to be? 30 feet long. I don't know if you guys have done research in the snake habitat pricing recently. That's about a $20,000 to $30,000 habitat, depending on what type of habitat you want to give it. So they are very expensive. Most people want to pay that much money for an animal that they probably bought for $100 or $200, and it was about this big in a pet store. So instead what they do is they either keep it in a habitat that is way too small and not mentally stimulating to the animal, or they take that animal and they release it into the wild where it doesn't belong. The only two things can happen when you release those animals into the wild where they don't belong, and both of them are bad. One of them is that animal does not know how to survive. It doesn't live in the right climate, or it just doesn't know how to find food. It's used to having hand-delivered meals, and so it starves to death or freezes to death, or it's too hot or something like that. The other thing is that animal knows how to survive really, really well. And you end up with an invasive species, such as the Burmese python down in the state of Florida, where we now have all these invasive animals down there, because people were buying these snakes when they were in pet stores, about this big as babies, without doing their research. And a year later, they had an over 10-foot long snake and had no idea what to do with it, so they turned to releasing that animal into the wild. But it's not just for moral reasons that we want to give these animals really good care. There's also a lot of biblical basis for why these animals need such good care.
There is. We can read about this in the book of Genesis, where God says he created man in his image and gave us dominion over all of creation. Now, dominion doesn't mean we get to do whatever we want with these animals. It means we as people are put here to be good stewards of his creation here on earth. Are we being very good stewards if we're keeping pets that are way too big and enclosures that are way too small? No. Are we being very good stewards if we're taking animals out of the wild and then just letting them go when we don't want them anymore? No, we can see big problems like this, like in the state of Florida with the Burmese pythons, or even over in Japan where these Taiwan beauty snakes were kept as pets, and then people over in Japan released them into the wild, and you have an invasive population of these guys over there. In fact, in Proverbs, it says, whoever is righteous has regard for the life of his beasts. Not just your cute fluffy beasts, but your slithery and scaly beasts as well. But I just, want to do a little bit of gear shifting here for a minute, because we just did a lot of talking about some of the biggest snakes in the world there, and how a lot of them are constrictors, like this Taiwan beauty snake. But what happens after they constrict their prey? Well, we have a really other sensational snake, don't we, that's going to help us out with this.
Yeah, so our next snake is actually a really interesting snake, because he loves to eat other snakes. And what have I been holding this whole show? Snakes. So I smell a lot like a snake. So I'm going to be using a snake hook to handle this animal to make sure it doesn't confuse my fingers for a snake. Usually we wash our hands really good before doing that, but that ruins the point of the show. So we're going to go ahead and get him out here. All right, here we go. This is Mr. Tut. And Tut is a Woma python coming from Australia, just like Cyrus, who we met earlier. And he is a really interesting animal because he does not hunt like most snakes do, where he uses his tongue and his senses to locate that prey. He lets the animal do the work for him. What he does is something called caudal luring. He will take the tip of his tail and he will wiggle it back and forth like a little worm like this. And he will try and lure in other snakes, other lizards, maybe a bird or something like that. And when they get really close, he will reach out, bite that animal, wrap around it super tight, and then swallow that animal whole.
Ooh, now snakes have some amazing jaws in order to swallow their prey whole. In order to demonstrate how amazing they are, I need everybody to open their mouths as wide as they can and say, ah. Awesome. Now let's show that we as people can open our mouths to about 30 degrees, which is pretty good. But snakes are capable of opening their mouths up to 130 degrees, which is what my dentist would like me to do when I visit him. Now, beyond that, they have an extra bone here highlighted in green called the quadrate bone, which is actually going to move these jaws back and forth like little fingers in their mouth. These tools working together allow snakes to swallow prey up to 5 times the size of their head whole.
Now, all those things together, like you said, allow them to swallow some pretty massive prey. But it's important to talk about what exactly that prey is. Because we see these snakes with those really sharp teeth that they have there. And we know that all snakes alive today do like to eat what? Little kids, right? However, all snakes alive do eat meat. But I have a really important question for you guys. Do you think snakes were designed to eat meat? Have they always eaten meat? No. Because when God first created the world was perfect. He called it a very good world. There was no sin. There was no death, no disease. Animals were not killing and eating each other. That did all change. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But it's important to realize that when God first created the world, not only can we see that there was no death, but it actually says what the animals were eating. It said that God gave everything that has the breath of life, every green plant for food. Meaning originally, every single animal was eating those plants. And some people have gone as far as to argue and say that can't be true because we have animals with sharp teeth, and animals with sharp teeth all love to eat meat, right? No. Not every single animal alive today that has sharp teeth loves to eat meat. In fact, there's some really good examples of lots of herbivores that have razor-sharp teeth and powerful jaws. A great example is the panda bear. Panda bear has the same tooth and jaw structure as every other type of bear. What do panda bears like to eat? Bamboo. Bamboo is a hard, woody grass. Bamboo is so tough, if you throw it in a wood chipper, it would jam your wood chipper up. So could they eat that with short, blunt teeth and weak jaws? No, they have to have those powerful teeth and powerful jaws in order to eat that food there. So you trust God's word. He says all of these animals were originally eating plants, because we can see some great examples alive today, such as the panda bear. But unfortunately, that did all change. Sin did enter the world when Adam and Eve disobeyed God in the Garden of Eden. With that sin, we got things like death, disease, we got thorns on plants, poison, and then something that is very relevant to the topic of snakes, and that is venom.
Now, one of my favorite examples of a venomous snake would have to be the gaboon viper. Gaboon vipers are native to Africa and are hold 2 world records for snakes alive today. For one, this guy's got the longest fangs, growing up to 2 inches in length in his mouth there. And for another, this guy can go the longest amount of time without pooping. Up to 420 days to be exact. But this guy's native to Africa. Here in the United States, we don't really have to look out for gaboon vipers. There's really only 4 basic types of snakes that we need to be on the lookout for. Y'all might notice them here. Here we have copperheads, rattlesnakes, cottonmouths, also known as water moccasins, and what's this last one called? Does anybody know? The coral snake, that's right, who is drop for drop the most venomous snake in the United States. And we want to be able to tell our venomous and non-venomous snakes apart. So I'm actually going to go ahead and get out our next snake in order to tell. What I want everyone to do is kind of look at this snake and tell me, what do you think? Is it a venomous or non-venomous snake?
Non-venomous.
Non-venomous? You're right, she's not venomous. This is Rahab. Rahab is a Puebloan milk snake, and she is completely harmless. You probably wouldn't see me holding a venomous snake like this. But she does look a lot like a snake we just talked about, doesn't she? What does she look like there? The coral snake. In fact, she would love for you to believe that she is a coral snake. She's doing something called mimicry, which is where a harmless animal like this tries to look like a venomous animal in order to protect itself. Fortunately for us, there's a couple of funny ways we can use to tell them apart. One way I've heard is by the shape of the head. If it's got a diamond or triangular shaped head, it must be venomous. If it has a rounded shaped head, it must be non-venomous. Well, there's a couple issues with that way. One, many of our non-venomous snakes can actually move the bones in their skull into a triangle to try and trick a predator into thinking they're venomous. For another, if you look at our little replica coral snake there, he's got a teeny tiny rounded shaped head there, so we can't really go off of that one. Another one being by the shape of the eyes. That if it has a rounded pupil like ours, it must be non-venomous. If it has a slit pupil or elliptical pupil like a cat eye, it must be venomous. Well, Mr. Coral Snake ruins that again with a rounded shaped pupil. And are you guys a safe distance from Rahab right now? Yeah, can you see the shape of her eyes?
No.
No, so if you were to find a snake outside, wanted to know what type it was, picked it up and gone, huh, could this snake kill me? Do you think you might be a little bit too close to that snake? Absolutely. So the best way you can tell is by the colors and patterns of the snakes in your area. It can get a little tricky with these milk snakes, which is why we like to bring her out for this part. It's a little poem that helps us remember. It goes, if the red touches the black, it's a friend of Jack or Venom Black. But if the red touches the yellow, it could kill a fella. Now, personally, I think if I see a snake outside that looks like it belongs in a crayon factory, I'm probably just going to leave it alone just to be safe. But regardless, those colors and patterns are the best way to tell if a snake is venomous or not, so that way you can choose how to stay safe around it. But how do we stay safe around these snakes?
Well, in fact, the general rule of thumb with all these snakes is just leave them alone. If you do not know what type of snake you're dealing with, give them the space they deserve. And that's because 85% of venomous snake bites occur 5 minutes after the snake's been spotted. And the reason for that is people either try and catch or kill that snake and end up getting bitten in the process. But in all likelihood, if you give these animals the space they deserve, you will never be bitten by one of these snakes. What happens if you do get bitten by one of these venomous snakes? Should we be really, really afraid of these snakes? Well, they could potentially kill us as people, but on average, every year in the U.S., about 8,500 people are bitten by venomous snakes every year. Out of those people, how many of them do you think die every year? Only 4, maybe 5 people die every single year when they're bitten by the snakes. Actually, there's a lot more animals we consider to be pets here in the United States that kill way more people than venomous snakes every year. Animals such as horses, cows, pigs, deer, even household dogs kill more people in the United States every single year than venomous snakes. You're even more likely to have a random bolt of lightning strike you and kill you, or having a vending machine fall on top of you and crushing you to death than you are to die from a venomous snake. Well, when was the last time you saw somebody running away in fear because you saw a vending machine? Probably never happened. Now that being said, there are lots of vending machines located around the Ark encounter, so be very, very careful after you exit this program. You don't really have to worry about vending machines too much. As long as you don't pull them down on top of yourself, you'll probably be fine. But they can be potentially deadly, so it's kind of funny to point that out there. But we want to talk about these animals with them being potentially deadly creatures, because a lot of people are afraid of these animals because of that venom there. But the thing is, that really doesn't make them bad animals. Some people have even gone as far, though, as to say these animals are evil creatures. We've heard people say some biblical basis for that as well, but I think we should introduce our final snake in this program to better help us talk about this final topic here. And this is Miss Cachette. Cachette is our Brazilian rainbow boa, and she is a very beautiful snake here, but rainbow is kind of the last word that comes to mind when you look at her. She's brown, orange, and tan, which is not exactly all the colors of the rainbow, but that's because she's underneath the stage here. If you were to take her under direct sunlight, she'd actually refract a beautiful rainbow iridescence, and she has little microscopic prisms all along her body. We'll talk about why we like that, and why we like to talk about that here in the Ark encounter in just a second. But I want to go back to talk about snakes being evil. As we've heard a lot of people say, that because Satan disguised himself as a serpent in the Garden of Eden, that means snakes are evil because he chose that animal there. How many of you guys have ever heard somebody call snakes evil before?
Yes.
I've heard that many, many times. Well, there's 2 really big issues with that. For one, the Bible also compares Satan to a roaring lion, and there are passages in the Bible talk about demons possessing pigs. When you think about pigs and lions as evil animals?
Yeah.
No, not at all. On top of that, it is actually impossible for any animal to be evil. And the reason for that is animals are not created in the image of God, and they were not given morality. We as human beings, we were. God created us in His image, and He gave us the ability to know right from wrong. But He also gave us free will. And that free will means that we can make our own decisions, and we can do what we know is the wrong thing, therefore making us evil. Animals can't do that. They act off of instincts. They don't know right from wrong. When they feel threatened, they defend themselves or they try and run away. When an animal's hungry, it goes after something it considers to be food. And unfortunately, people do get mixed up in that process from time to time. And while that is sad, that will never ever make an animal evil. But fortunately enough for us, we know the world is not always going to be that way. And we don't always have to deal with that. But the Bible actually makes some really good promises like that on our station.
Which is precisely why we like to talk about the rainbow boa here at the end of the show. Because I feel incredibly blessed to work with them here at the Ark encounter. Every time I see them, it reminds me of God's promise, like the one He gave us through the rainbow, to never again flood the entire world with water. But this points to another amazing promise He gave us, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And that was when God sent His Son, Jesus Christ, to die on the cross for our sins. You know that whoever believes in Him shall have an everlasting life in heaven. So we do ask you, if you don't know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you get to know Him today. And if you do know Him as your Savior, you continue to share that good news with others around you so they may have that same everlasting life in heaven. But that's not the only promise we get. There's also a promise of restored creation. And I love this verse because snakes are actually included in that. It says in the book of Isaiah that one day the wolf shall dwell with the lamb, the lion shall eat straw like the ox, and my favorite part is it says that children will play with venomous snakes, and we know they will not be afraid. Which paints a very beautiful picture of what that restored creation will look like, and I personally cannot wait for that day. We're about to end our program here, but before we let you guys go, we are in a minute going to invite you guys up this yellow line, like we said earlier, to allow you to pet some of our snakes. We just ask you to stay on that side of the yellow line. But other than that, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day, and thank you for joining us.